we were talking about it earlier, we could do a graduate school class on this title. Course correcting by balancing growth and profitability. Little things like how do we increase and minimize costs? How do you drive new business? Before we dive into that though, Drew, tell us about you a little bit. You come up to these things, you do a lot of stuff. How did you get to where you are? You're CEO of a omni-channel company, opening up stores all over the place, 1 million people on your website.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked a little bit about it, you know, in the back, just super blessed, right, to come into my career at a time when, you know, the internet was just sort of forming. And so, yeah, I've been an entrepreneur my whole career. First company we built and sold to DoubleClick. So was at a lot of these conferences through the years.
Yep.
I was head of retail at DoubleClick before we sold to Google. And then I've been building companies ever since. So I've founded, you know, 15 companies now. You know, we have invested in over 100 as the current portfolio. And Indochino we've been building, you know, for 10 years and sold billions of dollars worth of suits all over the world, 52 countries. So, yeah, it's just been a journey and another 50 years to go.
Cool. So You're having a lot of fun, it sounds like.
Love it, yeah.
Now, so if we think about this topic, so let's jump into this topic here a little bit.
Yeah.
We've got this concept, so right now you've got 73% of your business is coming out of your showrooms, from what I understand.
Yeah.
How are you balancing that channel? So you got the showroom business, you were saying you're opening up around 80 stores, is that about right?
We're opening 55 this year. We've got over 100, so it's a big year for us.
Okay.
One's with a partner, which is super exciting. We'll hopefully announce that in a couple weeks.
Okay.
But yeah, man, it's a journey, right? And like, yeah, every business has stages to it, and then depending on, you know, what category you're in, you know, sometimes you have to evangelize. Like with made-to-measure custom suiting, you know, 10 years ago, it wasn't common, right? People didn't have a place to go to get an affordable, high quality, incredible experience garment. And we just really saw the opportunity to make that available to everyone. And so, you know, over 10 years, we've grown over 1,000% as we moved from an online-only brand to an omni-channel brand. So a lot of growth. I think one of the blessings of COVID and the pandemic was, you know, just really sort of checking yourself and saying, okay, we got to also make sure we're sustainable, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. And so we've grown quite a bit since 2019, but nowhere near the 40% plus CAGR we had pre-COVID. And it's really just been all about, you know, profitability, and we're kind of relentless. So we've got, you know, in terms of costs and different strategies we have, but you know, our premise with any business is really 3 things, and we focus on them relentlessly. One is people, so having amazing people in the company, more of a focus on quality than quantity. So when I think about, you know, 2019, our EBITDA has improved about 1,300 to 1,400%. We've been profitable. We were a 9-figure revenue company since 2017, so a big revenue base, but we focus on people. We want to really pay them well and develop them instead of building out just massive teams. You know, we've got over 3,000 people working on the brand every day, but we probably could have more just given our size. The second would be product. So just, you know, relentlessly focusing on how you can make the product great for the customer, but also make sure it makes sense business-wise, right? And, you know, again, when you're evangelizing a product, one of our strategies early on was, from a pricing strategy, was to make it available to the 70% of the market that pays under $400 for a suit. That becomes a little bit unsustainable as you go as a brand, and so, you know, our average price point right now is about $474 US, and we're coming out with a different line, an orange label, or excuse me, a green label, to serve the market at 400 or below. But just really focusing on the product. And then the third thing is the magic sauce, right? You've got to have great partners.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've raised well over $100 million to the business. I've got shareholders in China, Japan, Boston, Seattle, just a really, really great group of shareholders that have a strategic impact on the business. So it's not just about, raising the capital and keeping them updated. One of our largest investors is our manufacturer, right? We sold 18% of the business for $30 million US in 2015 to our manufacturer and said, hey, let's build this together. And that's turned out, to be a really great partnership.
Awesome. So one thing I want to ask you about, so you have an 88% out of the box fit rate, which seems pretty phenomenal if you think about it.
Yeah.
And so, when I was thinking about this topic and looking at that number, that has to decrease your cost. You were telling me some obscene number that you were having to invest just around making sure that you could keep these customers happy with fittings. Tell me a little bit about this. So it's a pretty interesting story. So you got an 88% out of the box rate. You want to drive customer loyalty, so that's going to do it. That's going to decrease your cost. But then you also found out, or were telling me about, that you actually also increase loyalty when you're doing these fittings.
Yeah, I was smiling.
How does that work?
Yeah, I was smiling at the out of the box rate because it used to be so bad. 10 years ago we were really struggling, and what we realized back then is, like, unless we could figure out the supply chain, there's no way we could scale the business, right? And so we really taken a lot of care. The number, you and I were talking about, and this is an interesting one. Like, we spent last year almost $15 million US on what we call remakes. So, hey, we make you a suit, either one of you, just doesn't fit, we can't alter it, let's remake it for you. So that's a cost. Or we've got 70 in-house tailors across North America, plus free alterations at Nordstrom. That's a cost. And then we have something called appeasements, and that's $15 million. That's a big number. And on a percentage basis, though, it's a third of what it used to be. Like, it's a very complicated business. We did well over 1 million one-of-a-kind garments last year. And think about that, like, every garment is one of a kind. Like, there's no other. The monogram, the lining, the stitching, it's all one of a kind. And so it's pretty hard, right? And it's been our passion to try to get it right. I'd love to see the out-of-the-box rate, get to 99.9. So we'll see. It's going to take some time.
How did you, so you talked a little bit about supply chain. You mentioned to me that that's something that you guys have really mastered. Is that part of how you get to this out of the box rate? Like, how do you streamline that to get to such a high rate? Like, how does that work? And keep your costs down doing it.
Yeah, the first thing I think about when you asked that was how many times we've gotten inquiries to really digitize the fitting process. So I don't know how many of you have been to an Indochino or ordered online, but it's a pretty involved process, right? You spend an hour with a style guide, you're getting measured, you're picking your fabric, you're doing all of these things, or you're doing it yourself. I call it self-serve online. And there's a lot there, right? And what we didn't do was we didn't get into, virtual reality or some of the technology that's really out there to do fit, because we have to get it right. So it's old school, man. Like, it's, we fit you with a garment, we taper it, we take the measurements, all of that's transported to China in real time. We actually have 3,500 people in China working on the business every day now. And then that garment gets to you, it's produced and shipped in 6 days. So hopefully it gets to you in 2 weeks, which is our promise. But you just really have to get that right. And when I think back to 10 years ago, we were trying to, like, really save money, we thought, by having multiple manufacturers. So I had 6 manufacturers across, just outside of Shanghai, all doing our product, coming into our central hub, and then us doing our magic to get it out to the customer, and that's just not scalable. So when we partnered with Diang, who's an incredible company, our costs went down. I'll tell you an interesting story, actually. 10 years ago, our gross margin was 34%. For any of you that know a retail business, you can't survive on 34%. So, our gross margin now is over 60%.
Okay.
And so a lot of that has to do with how we optimize supply chain, not just working with DHL, we partnered with them. Long-term, 7-year agreement. when all costs were going through the roof during the pandemic, our costs were staying stable or coming down with our rebate. And so we just took a really strategic approach. Again, people, product partners, to the supply chain, and there's nobody that does it like us. There's nobody, at our scale anywhere in the world. So,
value of customer, retaining customers, loyalty, costs. You see a big difference between your online customer and your in-store customer. Do you see omni-channel relationships between those customers? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, our thesis when we opened stores at a time when everybody was like, what are you doing? Stop. And even my board was like, what are you doing? And so we just felt like, we had to get away, and I think this is an important thing for any, sort of young direct-to-consumer brand. We had to get away from selling a product. We had to sell an experience. And so we saw the showrooms as an opportunity to create this really unique and one-of-a-kind experience, one of a kind being how the garments are made. And so we created an appointment-based selling model. I wake up every day, I look at our reporting, we'll have 7,000 to 8,000 appointments across the week. And so that's built-in demand to our showrooms. I said, hey, no inventory, right? Like I don't want to get into that, even when we get into retail. And so of the 1 million garments we made last year, none of them were pre-built. They were all made after the order, which is, I think the future of retail. And then I guess the last thing is like, we talked about this backstage, but I think it's important for any business. Like, don't be afraid to make mistakes, right? Like embrace the mistake, especially when it comes to the customer. And what I mean by that is like, if we have an opportunity to make the garment better, let's do it, because that establishes an even deeper relationship with the customer. If we have a chance to remake your suit, let's do it, right? Even though that's a pretty significant cost. And what that produced is a 20% higher lifetime value for those customers that have alterations and remakes, which is kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
You think, oh my God, we didn't get it right, so they're not going to come back, but they actually come back because we made it right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Supply chain, so you kind of might have already talked about this here a little bit, but if you don't get supply chain right, it's a problem. And it sounds like you learned some things. You had 6 manufacturers, you consolidated down to really one big one, sounds like?
Yep.
But how are you protecting against supply chain today to ensure this product? Is that gets to the consumer in those 2 weeks? And
yeah, we really have to give that a lot of thought, right? Because we built all of our operations in China. I'm over there. I've been over there 50, 60 times throughout the last, decade, and we love it. We've got an amazing team. The business that we're partnered with is a 46-year-old company founded by one woman with a sewing machine. Like, just an amazing story, amazing company. And so I think it's really good, but we're going to go public at some point. And so we can't have single-threaded manufacturing, and we have to have geographic diversity. So one of the things we're going to be looking at over the next 18 to 24 months is, what other country do we set up in? We'll do it with our partner because of our philosophy around partnerships. We won't do it without them, but we're going to need to diversify our supply chain now that it's at this scale. And for any of you that have taken a company public, you have to take away those risks in order to go public.
so last question for you before we go to the audience here. Future of retail. I'm going to guess you have an opinion about made to order. Is this where things are going to go?
I'm just so excited about where we're at, right? Like, I don't believe, and this, may be a little bit of an opposing view, I don't believe that there's online-only businesses. I don't believe there's retail-only businesses. I believe there's commerce businesses. And you have to have a diversified approach to your channels and how you sell. But I really, really, and this is something we've thought, for the last decade and have been validated, through some of our partnerships with Nordstrom. We're announcing another major department store partnership that's of huge scale. They all want to move to virtual inventory, because when you think about, the balance sheet of a retailer, you think about the P&L, the cash flows, all those wonderful things that you talk with finance every day about, it's really hard to manage inventory. And I think with the customer where they're at now, with as much choice as they have, as demanding, and rightfully so as they are, you really have to be nimble. And I think the days of, ordering 1 million garments, seeing how it sells, I think those days are going to come to an end. I think the world's going to move, more to made to order. We're made to measure, which is essentially a form of made to order. But all made to order means is you order it, it's produced after you order, and it's sent to you. We used to do that in 7 weeks a decade ago. We're now doing it to your door in 2 weeks. There will be a day when we do that in 2 or 3 days, just not tomorrow, but there will be a day.
That's great.
Yeah.
Drew wanted to take a couple of questions. Is there any questions from the audience?
Are you doing women's?
Yeah. Really.
Are you doing women's was the question.
Yeah, super excited. I wanted to launch women's for so many years. It's super complicated. The form of a woman is very different than a man. There's so many different, versions. And so we really had to take a lot of time with what we call the silhouette. And so we've got 3 silhouettes for a woman. And we launched, omni-channel last April. I was super proud of the team. It's so great. And it went really well. We've actually, we have a big media budget. So we spend, I don't know, in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 million US a year on media. We haven't spent a lot on women's yet. We wanted to make sure we did it right. But interestingly, and I didn't think this when we were going to launch it, the remakes and the alterations are not as high as men's. I thought they'd be through the roof, but so far so good. So, yeah. So come on in.
Anybody else out there have a question for Drew? There's a couple people back there.
The question here in the back. So you were talking about the profitability and that you don't look at the channels where you come from, but maybe you can talk a little bit about brick and mortar versus online, and if you look at profitability in that way.
Yeah, so that's actually a really, really good question for a business like ours, right? Like traditionally in retail, you're looking at things on a per unit basis. You're making sure 4-wall profitability and your EBITDA margins on a per unit basis are healthy in order to continue to invest in that retail unit. We don't look at it that way. Because of our business is we serve you in store, get your measurements, all of that goes into your profile. The chances are you're going to order it online next time you order. And so we see retail, number one, as a customer acquisition vehicle, frankly, much cheaper than some of our media channels. And then, we also just see it as an opportunity to grow the brand, right? And so when we present to our board, when we present to our shareholders, and even, when we go public, we present on a region basis. And we look at, we don't just look at retail, we look at the omni-channel in the region, right? So, Utah, we would never look at the unit or the 2 units we have there. We would look at the region and what's the profitability of the region. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool.
Cool. Well, I think we're at time.
Yeah, that was fun.
10 seconds left.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thanks
yeah.
for being up here, Drew.
Thanks,
Nice to
everyone.
meet you too.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Thank you.